Hello, my name is Louis Foreman, and I'm a member of the Intellectual Property Owners Education Foundation. And today we are very fortunate to have Danya Sherman, an entrepreneur and innovator with us. Danya Sherman is an entrepreneur who is passionate about combining human rights and technology innovation to create social change. She is the founder and creator of KnoNap, an invention developed to combat drink spiking. Danya has participated in the Global Good Fund Fellowship, Future Founders Fellowship, Kairos Fellowship, Halcyon Incubator, and the Target Incubator. She was featured as Washington Life's Technology 25 Innovators and Disruptors, DC Inno's 25 Under 25 Brightest Young Innovators, Cafe 100 Changemaker, Toyota's Mother of Invention, and Forbes 2020 Class of 30 Under 30 Social Entrepreneurs. Needless to say, Danya is no slacker, and so we're so fortunate to have her as our guest today. Welcome, Danya.
Thanks, Louis. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Danya, you have an impressive background and accomplished so much at an early age. Why don't you share with us your journey as both an entrepreneur and an innovator and how it all began?
Sure. So I always like to say I didn't start KnoNap with the intention of starting a company. I first found a problem that I was extremely passionate about and knew I needed to do something. And then from there needed to actually incorporate the company to receive money that we had won. So it's kind of funny. Backstory goes that I started KnoNap in the end of 2016, early 2017. And prior to that, even what is KnoNap? So pretty much I created, KnoNap stands for the napkin that knows. We created diagnostics capable upon saturation of detecting specific drug presence. We work to combat drink spiking and drug facilitated sexual assault and crime. When I was studying abroad, I'm very open about it. When I was studying abroad, I was drugged by a newfound friend. And it was only when I returned back to the States, I found that I wasn't alone statistically. I remember being in a room with 3 of my girlfriends, and they were the first ones I told when I came back to the States. 2 of the 3 said that either they had been drugged or knew someone that had been affected by drink spiking. Raised the question, why is no one talking about this? And it set me on a quest in 2016, 2017 to understand the landscape, which led to me taking a college course called Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership, received seed funding through my university's venture competition, took 6 months off from school to go into Halcyon's incubator, and one opportunity led to another, which is where I am sitting with you today. And actually, I'm in Arizona. I'm not in my usual office, which is why I have my virtual background on in this virtual setting. I'm in my childhood bedroom office, and it just shows the vastness of how COVID has changed the importance of traveling less and being more present. So excited to take this call with you. Sorry if my background's a little glitchy, but that is why. So that's a high level of how we started how I started the company and grew the team, had to change the team, filed for intellectual property. And it's been an amazing journey, and launching a new product actually in the next few weeks.
Oh, that's great. Well, Danya, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. And did you have any hesitation about solving this problem? Obviously, it all started with, kind of a personal situation with you while studying abroad. But any hesitation whatsoever on tackling something so massive as this?
Yes. There was a lot of hesitation. I had a lot of fear actually in starting the company. My undergraduate degree was security policy, military history, international affairs, and I did not have a business background. Both my parents are entrepreneurs, so I got to see them growing up to their company. But my biggest fear when I started was that this issue of drink spiking is extremely personal to me. I did not want to be stuck talking about the issue of sexual violence, drug facilitated crimes every day, all day. And it was something that when I actually started the company, in my pitches, I didn't share my personal story. I didn't want to be associated with it because I wanted individuals to see me as a young entrepreneur combating an issue, and I didn't want to be tied to my story. And it was only when I got into more pitching that one of my mentors said to me that, actually, Danya, there's so much strength in you sharing your story because it's your truth. And a lot of times investors and mentors and companies, whatnot, want to support the entrepreneur, not necessarily just the product. So when someone's buying a product, especially early on, they're buying into who the entrepreneur is. And especially investors, when you start a company, there are a lot of issues that arise, and they need to know that you as the entrepreneur are bought into the solution, are bought into not necessarily the product, but your why. And everything changed for KnoNap. Everything changed for me when I started sharing my story and why I was so passionate about this issue. And I'll also add on, mental health is not talked about a lot, especially in the startup realm. There was a lot of there were a lot of conversations I had with therapists in terms of how do I go on stage and talk about one of my deepest, darkest moments to complete strangers. And that was definitely a growing moment. I found it to be very empowering, especially growing alongside the Me Too movement, sharing my voice, and, in Time's Up movement, saying, here's something that happened to me, here's what I'm doing about it. And, join us as we work together to combat drink spiking. But it definitely, fear is an understatement of a word. It was one of the greatest growing journeys, underpinned greatly in fear. But if you're not afraid, I think that means that, there's a quote, if you're not afraid of what you're doing or of your dreams and goals, then you need to grow your goals and dreams. So that's where I've stood with that.
Yeah. Well, pursuing this idea while a college student must have presented additional obstacles for you. And so if you could share with us, what challenge did you face as a college innovator coming up with this idea, and how did you overcome them?
As a college student, the biggest challenge I had was time management, because I was a full-time student. The only time I took off from school were those 6 months, right after I'd started KnoNap, to participate in Halcyon's incubator program. To the chagrin of my parents, I promised I would go back to school, and I did. I graduated on time. But time management, because I was traveling nationally to pitch, internationally to represent the US for my company. And, the way I kind of had it easier, though, that I had an amazing team at it every second. So I was always the one overseeing strategy, design, overseeing my technical team, but we were able to work together where I was not necessarily in the lab every day. I would be getting updates regularly. So I was supplementing my days with school, and then KnoNap was a break from school, and school was a break from KnoNap. And school was actually an amazing resource, because I was able to go into pitch competitions that were only accessible to student entrepreneurs. And so much so that it was a resource enough that I graduated from undergrad in 2019 and hopped right into an MBA. Graduated my MBA in 2021, and now I am no longer a student entrepreneur, happy to say. But I think school is an amazing resource. And for the students listening, it's my greatest advice is, if you have an idea, go for it, and don't let the pressures of what about splitting my time with school and not just do it. And there's so much that you can learn, and also school's a great backup. They're amazing mentors that you can have access to, pitch competitions, non-dilutive capital, but it came with its own risks and challenges along the way too.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you learned through your entrepreneurship class that being an entrepreneur and certainly being an innovator involves managing this relationship between risk and reward. And so obviously many businesses fail. Were you worried about failure? And how did you manage the risks associated with starting a business?
Was I worried about failure? Yes and no. Especially while I was a student, the way that I saw the company towards the end of my schooling was what a journey it's been. And thank God I've had this journey, because now if KnoNap fails, I can take this to my next company, say, look at what I've done. It's only an add-on. Going through that before coming to that sobering, the necessity of that sobering conversation with myself and my team, I had such a naivete. It was, we were never going to fail. This was going to be my ride or die company. I was going to make it a success. And I think that there needs to be that naivete, especially for young entrepreneurs, that you can do no wrong, that you make a decision, you make decisions and you stand by them. And you find people that align with you and you stand by those people. And yeah, especially it was a lot of naivete. When I started, I had no idea of where we would be today. But I do pin and I really highlight that I did not fall in love with our product. I fell in love with combating the issue. And so very early on, I created, through Halcyon's program and the advice they gave us, our mission, vision, and values. And that has been my North Star through everything in terms of any activity we've undertaken. Does it align with our mission, vision, and values? Any pivot and evolution of the product had to align with our mission, vision, and values. And if we didn't have that, and I saw this with my friends, if you get distracted from why you're doing what you're doing and the core of your why, it's a lot easier to get off track and spend your money recklessly and not actually execute what you're doing. And so I think we're very fortunate. That's one of the reasons that I think we're still here today, is that realization that we need to boil the pot before we boil the ocean. So be laser focused on our why. Failure happens. I will tell you, one of my very dear friends, who I actually started my company alongside, we became friends when I started KnoNap, recently closed their company. And getting that call from them I have goosebumps right now, getting that call from them was very sobering. Things happen, and it's important as an entrepreneur to be able to know your value is not just in your company, but to also know when to walk away. And it's not necessarily a failure, right? You hear in modern time, your company closes, that's a failure. But it's, what is your KPI? What are you measuring your success on? But as of now, we're going full chartered, that we are evolving our product to make sure we're keeping in touch with changing drinking habits, and through COVID, following COVID-19 and going through COVID-19. But yeah, I don't see anything as a failure as long as you're learning.
Well, it's a good perspective on failure, because failure is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you learn from those mistakes and you adapt, and the next time you do even better. And so you started this business at the end of 2016, which means you're celebrating your 5th year in business, which is major accomplishment. 50% of businesses don't make it to the 5th year of business. And so you must have done something right. You must have properly prepared for this journey before you got started. But let's go back to the beginning, right? You've identified the problem, you're coming up with a solution. What was the development process, and how did you go from solution to product to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always chuckle that I am the type of person, I actually have notes all over my desk. I keep notes everywhere because I come up with ideas that in my next life, I'm going to get an engineering degree. I come up with ideas that I draw on paper and then I bring to my engineers and scientists and say, this is what I want you to actually execute on. So when I started KnoNap, I genuinely came up with the name and the idea in my college dorm. And what was funny about that is I remember actually drawing out the idea of KnoNap on a napkin. And I hired my first team through cold calls, right? I found laboratories that did contract development work for a chemical approach to product development. Through R&D, it just realized that we needed to pivot the technology away from what their capabilities were. So then we ended up hiring an additional team that had different specialties and worked with them. Once they actually developed the technology, I then said, okay, I want to integrate this into, at the time it was napkins, but now we pivoted to our product KnoNap, which we took the IP from what were our napkins and integrated them into what looks like sticks of gum. So it's something that is, I can go into how we evolved from napkins to what looks like sticks of gum. But then we had to hire engineers, specifically mechanical engineers that could do the CAD renderings. We had our packaging people. It was all, thank God I found like an amazing, next lab that kind of handheld me through. Danya, make sure you have this in place. Danya, make sure you have that in place. But it's really just to say, making sure you have the right partners and people that back you. And when you're looking at growing your team, the best thing you can do is understand what are your capabilities currently and what do you need capability wise to get to that next step. And I knew that I have business development down pat. I have pitching down pat. I have now finances down pat. I have my MBA, but before that, I barely knew how to use Excel. And I needed to hire outside for those skills and make sure that you're adding on those skills first and foremost. And that's what we did. But that was our process: growing, hiring, not necessarily firing, but hiring, and then hiring. And the main thing in growing your team is being able to have hard conversations. That's something that I cannot underpin enough, is the importance of taking not necessarily emotion out of business, but taking out that emotional, like personal component when you need to do contracts, when you need to negotiate anything or make sure that standards are kept and expectations are maintained. Because at the end of the day, it is business, and but having healthy relationships, I'm happy to talk about that. Culture setting, all that good stuff. But it's definitely been exciting.
Well, it's a learning experience for sure. I mean, here you got your undergrad degree, you got your MBA. Who taught you about intellectual property? Was that something that was brought up in a class, or did you have to learn on the fly?
A little of both. And also I'm extremely blessed that my parents are both entrepreneurs and have had experience with intellectual property. The first time I called them and I said, I have this idea for KnoNap, my parents said, make sure that you do a freedom to operate search. Make sure that you understand what is the landscape before you start investing resources and time being a major resource. Make sure that this is something that you can even do. And when I actually started the idea, I remember that it was SafeStir. The idea I was playing around with was called SafeStir, and it was a stir stick. The idea was a stir stick capable of detecting drug presence. When I did a rudimentary search on my own, I found that there were quite a few patents already that were active on stir sticks that were doing similar methods of testing. So I went, this is interesting. Why did they not commercialize? Which then brought me on a whole other tangent of research of trying to understand what is the IP out there right now, what were maybe the implementation issues. So SafeStir evolved into KnoNap, because I wanted to have a product that was still a beverage accessory that maybe had more freedom to operate. And then now KnoNap evolved into Nope. So it's say Nope to drink spiking, KNOPE. But yeah, it's starting off, we did patent searches, understanding what is freedom to operate. And I got connected with amazing legal counsel through one of my mentors. And they have been amazing since 2016 in not only providing legal advice, but also being, their mentors and advisors. They've seen businesses succeed and fail. So even just being able to have those contacts and say, hey, we're working through contracts right now. Hey, do you have someone that you can put me in touch with, please? They've been amazing. So finding allies is really my main thing.
Well, it's great that you had that legal advice from very, very early on from your parents, because many businesses make huge mistakes. They pursue IP after they've come up with the idea, after they've disclosed the invention, or they just go into it blindly without even doing that freedom to operate, search to figure out, am I infringing on anyone else's IP? And so when we talk about the intellectual property, what role did it play in your final decision to pursue this innovation? And I'm assuming it also helped when it came to raising capital as well.
Yeah, so we are actually completely self-funded right now. In terms, we've received capital from grants, personal investments that I've put in, and corporate supporters. So in terms of investments, it would have been extremely helpful in terms if when we do raise, and I do have aspirations and to raise, my goal was always to wait till we had product on market and validation, because then you can have a better valuation for your company. And I was so fortunate that we had capital coming in through grants and pitch competitions. But in terms of the role of IP, it was extremely important to be able to say this is our stake, and even for us to just, for me, in my sanity of mind, knowing that as I'm disclosing when I'm going into these pitch competitions and I'm speaking to audiences of investors and people I didn't know who was in the audience most of the time, I needed to know that, at least to the very core, that we had provisional patents in place that would protect what I was disclosing. And I was very careful to, later on, when I had conversations with our attorneys and things were actually developing, on what I should and should not disclose, whether that be what our drug testing capabilities were, our method of testing, how we did the testing. Fortunately, unfortunately, since it is a tech diagnostic device, and I am a non-tech founder, my risk of disclosing the minutia of the details without having the paperwork in front of me to reference was pretty low, because I can talk on the high level of our execution and strategy and what we were doing and why we were doing it. But if you wanted the actual chemical names of what was integrated, what makes the secret sauce of our product work, that would be me looking at a screen with my glasses on saying, here are the names of all of it. So fortunately that helped in our favor, but making sure I knew what to say and what not to say with the legal rubber stamp of approval was very important.
Well, I'm guessing this was a very iterative process that you went through to develop the product. Typically inventors create prototypes of their invention to get to that proof of concept. James Dyson famously had 5,127 prototypes before he was satisfied with his vacuum cleaner. How many prototypes did it take you to finally get to Nope?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, if you go onto our Instagram, it's KnoNap. It's just KNONAP. We have put an image up on our story, or I guess it's in our Instagram. And I think there were and we didn't even include all of them. There must have been like 8 different iterations, from idea in Post-it form to 3D injection to 3D modeling to then injection molding. What was so funny about the iterations for Nope is I kept telling my team, this is what I want. and I was drawing it out for them. And somehow this 100% falls on me. I was not communicating to them well enough what I wanted, that they were able to actually execute on it. So I went to Marshall's and I bought a machine called a Cricut. Are you familiar with
I
Cricut?
am, sure.
Cricut, the cutter, the paper cutter that's
Yes.
precise. And I taught myself how to use a Cricut machine so that I could precisely show them exactly what I wanted. And that was the design or the initial layout, from post-it form to Cricut cutter to then hiring that mechanical engineer who was able to take my Cricut designs and actually make something out of it, 3D modeling, and then injection molding further down the road. And that's really where I say I fell in love with our mission, not the product. So if founders, and I've seen this with my friends and myself too, it took a lot for me to change away and peel away from KnoNap, because that was my baby, right? You start your company, that's your vision. And I saw that with COVID and changing drinking habits, people were not socializing and wouldn't be socializing in places where bars and clubs were necessarily using napkins, right? And in order to stay alive and iterate and evolve with the market, we needed to change the product and pivot. So that's where we got to Nope. But yeah, it was the iterations took a long time, and just making sure along the way that we were using statistically significant data and feedback. So giving the product to people to have them hold, try, test. And one of the way that we actually got to Nope, right, from KnoNap, was I had conversations with friends, peers, complete strangers alike, and I used a software actually called Qualtrics. I don't know if you're familiar. They do amazing software specifically for conjoint analysis. And thank you, MBA, for teaching me how to use that software. And what it shows is how people value different attributes. One of the things that I asked in the survey was, what are you planning on carrying with you? And people, I think of the hundreds of people that filled it out, there were a few tens of people that said that they carry gum with them when they go out regularly. And I remember looking at that data point going, very interesting. That's actually the first little light bulb of maybe we should look into making the diagnostic into the aesthetic and dimensionality of a stick of gum. But we looked at different iterations. It wasn't always Nope, it was different form factors. And we just landed on Nope as our first iteration to launch with.
We've come a long way since that original Cricut cutter and getting your product to where it is today. But innovation's expensive, right? And there's no guarantee that you're going to be successful. So how did you finance the initial research and development in the early years, to the extent that you didn't take on any outside money from investors? Is it all personal savings and prize winnings from the pitch events?
Yeah, it was. R&D is extremely expensive. I used to be told like it's going to be like 3 times as expensive and 5 times as long as you previously anticipate. We were fortunate that I just lined up every pitch competition that had cash prizes, and I didn't spend time pitching at competitions that didn't have cash prizes. I would travel. So my schooling was in DC. I was so fortunate the university was very supportive of my company and of what we were doing, that they actually a few times would paid for our travel to these events. So the only cost I would incur, there really weren't any, would be time lost at school, especially towards the latter end. I joked that I was a full-time student, full-time entrepreneur, but I was a part-time student at that point. I was focusing mostly on my company, and the professors were so supportive of what I was doing, and they all knew, and I got all my work in, but they were a little more lenient with me. But the competitions were what financed us, and I will probably never do that again. if I'm being completely honest, because I never knew when I had money and I never knew when I didn't. So it made it very hard to, it made it extremely hard to plan. I remember this one time, I had an invoice for a bill that was coming in that was $10,000 more expensive than the money I had in the bank. I had to pay for R&D $10,000 more expensive than I had in the bank. And I had one pitch competition between that day and that net 30. First prize was $10,000. There were 52 companies that were competing, student entrepreneurial companies that were competing. And I remember thinking to myself, I will figure it out. Well, of those 52 companies that competed, I ended up winning the competition. And I got up on the stage to accept the check and I started to cry, not because I had won this competition, but because now I could afford the R&D I had signed off on the month prior. And I remember saying to myself when I got that check in the mail and then sent it right, deposited it and sent another check to my R&D team, saying to myself, I am never doing that again. I am way too young to have all these tension, wrinkles, and gray hairs. And I was looking at one point how much money I can make in working on part-time jobs, and which I have done. And especially when I was in college, I was always working alongside working on KnoNap and finding different hustle projects, but never again. So I would not recommend doing that for all the entrepreneurs out there, but very important to have the financing. But we figured it out. And that's where the naivete and absolute courage and belief in what you were doing is so important, because the world will tell you, especially as a young female entrepreneur, and it was my first time doing it, the world would tell you that you are not competent and that you don't know what you're doing. And so many stories. But you need to believe in yourself. And I remember and I'll finish on this anecdote. Sorry, Luce, I'm going on a tangent. But when I started the company, I had my first pitch competition, and there was a happy hour after. And actually at that competition, the first competition I participated in, I didn't win first, second, or third place, but I got Audience's Choice Award. And one of my mentors came up to me and said, Danya, that's the greatest validation you can get, is the stamp of approval from your peers. And after that competition, there was a happy hour, and you can't see on the screen, but I am a massive 5'4" stature, and in my heels, I have a nice 2 extra inches on my height. And afterwards, one of the judges had come up to me, and he had been drinking. I'll never forget this. Got in my face, and he said, I just want to let you know, to be supportive, that I spoke to my son, and this is 2016, spoke to my son, and we both agree that your idea is really stupid and it wouldn't work and it wouldn't be implemented, and you're better off just dropping it now, going on to the next company. And at the time I was working on Capitol Hill, so I was trained in constituent interactions, and where I went, thank you so much for your feedback. And I walked away. And I like to think back on that exchange when I think about like the trials and tribulations and the necessity for believing in yourself, that it's important to take data points along the way. It's very important to listen to what people say and be coachable. But it's another thing to stick to your gut as an entrepreneur and to have blind faith in yourself. So to that person, I would just like to say thank you. I don't remember who it was, but everything is said. I like to think everything is said with good intentions. And he's just a data point. So that, I don't remember what the question was, Lewis. I'm sorry, that got a tangent, but go ahead.
It's more motivation to be successful, right? To prove him wrong. And so, we're living in these unprecedented times. COVID threw the world, threw most entrepreneurs and innovators, for a loop. You obviously had to adapt. You had to adapt to a changing environment. to a change in resources, to a change in customer behavior. Tell us about, March of 2020, COVID starts shutting things down. What are you thinking?
I was thinking things I can't say on this call. No. It was definitely, it was an aha moment because I was getting calls from bars and clubs that we had been working with and talking with saying, Danya, we're trying to keep our doors open. We can't pay a premium on any beverage accessory necessity in our institution. And I went, you are right. And I hear you. So it was at that point that I realized we needed to align our end user and our purchaser. Because my goal was always that we would have our product accessible in bar and club settings, so individuals could opt out rather than opt in to use the product. And it was in March 2020, actually, when things started shutting down. I had that first call with my team, and I said, we need to evolve. We need to change. And that's when we started our market research of understanding what do people carry with them. You're in the peak of heightened concern. What do you think your drinking habits will be like in 6 months, a year? Where will you be drinking? And we've seen the trends actually very much where people from the beginning of COVID changed from drinking at mass, changed from drinking in social settings to more house parties, backyard events, barbecues, places of familiarity. Meaning that we needed to make and also with the caveat carrying fewer things with them, needed to make the product something that could be included in any social setting, maintain the core tenet of our company, which is gender inclusivity. So make sure that any offering was something that could be used by anyone in any social setting, carried in smaller things, whether that mean wallet, pocket, purse, whatever. And it just set out on a journey for us to do different surveys, understanding what people wanted, follow-up conversations, calls. We made 3 different prototypes of 3 different product ideas, got in people's hands, got feedback. And then it came down to 2. There were 2 ideas. And I remember having that call with my team and saying, full send, here's what we're doing, here's why. And choosing Note as the design of what we were doing. But there's a really awesome like suggestions for success. I think it's like 25 suggestions for success that you can actually Google. They're all the same. But one of them that was really impactful to me that my dad gave me the poster that had it. Well, the one suggestion for success that was most impactful to me was make decisive decisions, even if that means you'll sometimes be wrong. And I knew in that moment we needed to make a decision to proceed. If I was wrong and Nope was not the right form factor, at that point I realized we were wrong. We could have made another decision and moved on. But by the point that I was going back and forth between the 2 options, I was wasting time. So I knew I needed to make decisive decisions, even if that means that I'm sometimes wrong, and stand by those decisions. And that's how we came up with the idea for Note. But COVID, I think, really expedited what was already in play. I always wanted multiple product SKUs for our company because people have different drinking habits, and I wanted to meet people where they are. I just made it come a little faster than I thought it would. And it worked out perfectly though, in terms that, things happen for a reason of how we needed to have that data at what time and what point. Unfortunately, it was COVID-19 that spurred it and spurred those conversations. But fortunately, through whatever, it showed me and my team that in less than 2 years, we're able to completely have from initial design to final executed product and ready for manufacturing soon.
Well, I'd like to believe that things happen for a reason as well. And hopefully this pivot was the right direction for you to move. But obviously disrupting the form factor of the product probably required additional IP filings, correct?
Yes, it did.
And so what was the process at that point?
It was a very interesting process, to say the least. I remember having a call with my head legal counsel, and I was a little devastated, to be honest, that we had invested all this money in IP that, and now needed to pivot away from it. And granted, it's still applicable, but to a different degree. And she jokingly said, Danya, this is where we make all our money. This is great. You're fine. Like, we'll do the process again. And I was like, yes, we will. We don't have a choice. It was a very easy process because, again, I had an amazing team. So what we did is we just set up calls with my development team and talked through the iterations, talked through what is novel about the product, talked through where are the differentiations for our product, and which is a very basic conversation you have when setting up what are the components of IP that you can get on your product. And had those calls, drafted it up, signed a few more checks, and got additional IP. But it's extremely important, whether your IP be around trademarks, whether it be patents, copyrights. One of the things that I needed to do for Nope was make sure that we were registering trademarks so that we owned the name. And I had a conversation with my dad in, I think, March 2020, maybe even before then, when I was thinking of other products and iterations for KnoNap, to the point that he actually assisted me in getting Nope's trademark way before we had committed to the name so that we could have it stamped in the ground. And when the name was finally decided that that's what we were going to do, here's how we're doing it and whatnot, I was so thankful, again, believing and trusting in your mentors, that we had done that, because, then it made the process easier for filing. But the biggest thing as a student entrepreneur, I wish I would have known earlier, was to bite my ego and bite my pride. And the reason I say that is that a lot of the time when I started, I thought it was that I was the entrepreneur, I had the vision, I knew what was right. And what I've come to learn is I only know what I know, and I know what I don't know, but I don't know what I don't know. And there are people around me who are way smarter than me in many different things. And it's my job to find those people and surround myself with them as much as possible. And that means biting my ego when I'm wrong. And so now when I do calls with my team, I don't talk first. I say, here's the issue. What do you guys think? And because I need to trust that I've hired very, very smart people around me, and I have a very smart and competent team around me. I don't want an echoing chamber in anything that I do. And that includes with my friendships too. I want people of all backgrounds and to be around me, because that means that they're, adding value based on different perspectives. And I hope I can do that to them as well. But yeah,
great life lessons that come out of this, for sure. So you've been working for a couple of years now to get the new form factor done. When's the launch? I'm sure everyone wants to know when this product's going to be available.
Yes. So we're launching in a few weeks. You can go on our website, knonap.com, and it'll take you to show you our entire new pivot. And also there's a link to go on to our Indiegogo campaign right now, which you can sign up to learn more information for when we finally do make that big jump in formalizing it. But all I can say right now in terms of date, it's coming in a few weeks. And I am so excited to share Nope with you all.
Yeah, this is really the culmination of all of these years, all of the commitments and the sacrifices and the time spent, pitching at events to finally see, your baby born. What is that going to mean to you when you see consumers actually interact with the product that you envisioned?
It was humbling, to say the least, that it's been, and I still can't even believe it'll be 5 years that I've been working on KnoNap and Nope. When I first held Nope in my hands, and I knew it was going to be a big moment for me, I actually recorded myself on the camera opening the box. And because it came from my lab, completely beautiful tests and everything, the final iteration, the injection molded, fully loaded strips, everything, that it was a test. And I got a video of me opening it. And I sometimes look at the video now and I laugh, but I'm holding these tests and crying because to me, what it represents is not my work, doesn't represent necessarily the work of my team, but it does. But to me, what it means is over 5 years ago, I set out on a mission to combat the issue of drink spiking. And it makes me extremely filled with humility that through the trials and tribulations, through the pivots, through the ups and downs, and the pitching, the winning, the losing, everything, that this was a culmination of all of our work together to create social impact. And I think it would have meant a lot if it was just an issue that it's a product I made, right? That's one thing. That's an amazing feat. But the fact that it was so personal from the beginning, I think in that moment of opening them and holding it for the first time, I can't even put words to it. It was amazing. I don't think I've ever had a feeling like that. And I hope that I have many moments like that in the future with future products that we have. But in terms of our Gen 1, it was humbling.
That's great. So 5 years ago, you identified this terrible problem, you create a solution, you start the journey. Today, what's your vision for KnoNap moving forward? And is it the same vision today that you had 5 years ago?
Really good question. So as part of our mission, vision, and values, I really dug deep when I started the company on what is a vision of the world that KnoNap exists in. And I said when I started the company that my vision for what KnoNap exists in is for us to be put out of business. Because one of the ways the company is threefold through our mission, which was a really good joke when we were a napkin. Not as much anymore now. Stick some gum. I used to say we are a 3-ply company. We work to empower, educate, and advocate against drink spiking. The educate part is one of the components that, in terms of our vision, making sure everyone is educated against drink spiking. Because what I found is specifically on college campuses, people were not having the conversation around drink spiking. They would talk a lot about consent and bystander awareness. But if you're not aware of drug facilitated crimes, you can't empower yourself against that issue. So to that point, the vision that I set out on was a world in which individuals are educated on what is drink spiking and how do you best empower yourself against the issue. And I still hold true to that, but I firmly believe through education, through advocacy reforms to create harsher penalties for persecutors of sexual violence, that we're able to create a world where, the issue of drink spiking actually just happens in movies, which is a quote I've heard by a lot of people so many times in the journey of, doesn't this issue only happen in movies? And the most humbling part of my journey is pitching and doing events similar to these. And afterwards, having people reach out to me and say, thank you. I was drugged and I've been affected by drink spiking or drug facilitated sexual assault and crime. And to me, those are the most humbling parts because it just validates that the issue that we're working on championing and combating is much larger than just me. And I think that is the core part of why I got so emotional holding our product, is that it was something that started from a personal issue that then I went, wait, this is so much larger than me. How do I actually do this?
That's great. Danya, there are many people that believe that patents limit competition, that patents increase the cost of a product or are a tax on innovation, and ultimately the consumer has to pay that tax. How would you respond to that? And why was intellectual property so important for you in pursuing this product?
I would say that intellectual property and patents in particular are extremely crucial. I, similar to fellow entrepreneurs, are investing tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars in R&D and research and development. And we are taking on that risk that we are putting money into a pit and hoping for a return down the road, or we're putting money into a pit and hoping that our product will come through it, it'll make social impact, it'll resonate with people. And the patent is what, to some extent, protects our investment to any degree, that we've put in the money to develop it, we've put in the research, we've put in the risk, that we also are able to get that return. And patents are so important because without them, I don't see a landscape for which people would be willing to take that risk. That, that I'm building this product, and then Lewis, you see it and you're able to run with it tomorrow. I mean, you hear all these stories, if you know, or if you're familiar with the jelly bean story, right? Of people that have come up with ideas and products, and then they're taken and overnight someone else runs with it. So the importance of IP, it can't be understated enough. But are you familiar with the jelly bean story?
Are those the jelly bands?
The jelly beans, jelly beans, the little beans of jelly.
I don't think so.
No, yeah, you don't know jelly beans?
I don't know jelly
I'm
beans.
going to send you some jelly beans. That's like my childhood. Can someone write in the Q&A that you know what jelly beans are? Jelly beans, they're like little candies that look like, okay, well, pretty much the person
like the edible jelly beans.
Yeah, jelly beans.
Oh, of course.
Okay, I was like,
there isn't a candy I don't know. I thought we were talking about a product, not a consumable, edible.
But similar point is that
novelty. Yes.
Yeah, the person who came up with the jelly bean originally, the idea was stolen. And so what we know as the jelly bean today was actually the stolen concept. And so the original person, there was a whole movie that came out of it. Okay, Lewis, I was like, jelly bean, I'm going to send you some jelly beans right now. But similar. So it's to say that IP is important, not just in tech, health tech, any ideas, any products, anything that has a novelty, a component that you're putting in your resources into, advising with legal counsel to see where you can protect. It's so important. And look into the jelly bean story because it's fascinating. It's just an example of, it's an example of situation in which, the original inventor didn't get the appropriate protection and someone else came in and did.
Yeah. So it's so easy to copy products today versus being an innovator and come up with original ideas for products. And that's why patents obviously are so important as that incentive for all of us to go out and be those innovators, to create those new game-changing and breakthrough disruptive products and technologies that change people's lives. This has been an interesting journey for you, I'm sure. It's only 5 years, and I know you've got many, many more years of discovery in front of you. But looking back over the last 5 years, what was the most important lesson that you learned during that period of time?
Ooh, I think the most important lesson is being kind to yourself. And I kind of spoke about that earlier, but the importance of mental health in entrepreneurship. There is often a narrative in startups and specifically in tech of the grinds, the hustle, the importance of, grinding. And I've seen this with my friends and I experienced it myself. Burnout is real. And when you are working so hard on something and you burn out and you don't enjoy the journey, people quit, people drop, and you're less able to adapt when needed. I picked up cycling during COVID. I actually cycled 1,800 miles last year, going from nothing to 1,800 miles because it was the only way for me to get out of my house and apartment and whatnot. And I was on a bike ride once and I saw randomly this woman had a shirt that said, "The destination is the journey." And I'm on a 40-mile bike ride and I look up at a random moment and I see that. And it's kind of been something I keep in the back of my head of, I need to enjoy the journey because that is the true destination. And what I found is I always said, when I get to X point, I will be happy. And then I get to X point and I move the mountain. And I say, when I get to that next point, I'll be happy. And I've had to change that paradigm of, I reached this milestone. I'm going to take 30 seconds to enjoy it, just feel that excitement, and then I'm going to move on. Because it's not the highs and it's not the lows that are going to define me as an entrepreneur or as a person, but it's what I accomplished long term. So making sure that I'm investing in my mental health and saying that to my team too. Every intake, every person I bring on, I say, I want you to know if you ever have a bad day, communicate that with me and you will have the day, right? Because I want you to be able to come back tomorrow refreshed and ready to go. And investing in mental health and making that part of our culture and the culture of people around me and expecting that, not only in everyone I work with, all my friends, mentors, everything. You don't talk to someone more than you talk to yourself. So being able to know that that I have a good relationship with myself and that my team have a good relationship with me and just open dialogue is so important. So,
I've got a couple more questions for you, Danya.
Sure, please.
And these are going to be kind of the life lesson questions, right? So we all make mistakes. They're inevitable, and we learn from those mistakes. But looking back at some of the mistakes that you made, which ones would you want a do-over for? Like which mistakes do you wish that you could have prevented from the very beginning? And what impact would that have had on your business moving forward?
Really good question, because throughout the growth of KnoNap, I've tried to never position anything as a quote mistake, just a learning opportunity. One thing could be hiring friends. Earlier on when I was looking for potentially interns, putting people on my team to support that were friends made it hard for me to grow my management style because I was not only managing a professional relationship, but also throwing in contingencies of a personal relationship. Granted, I saw my parents growing up and they have a good business together and have been very successful together. But since then, I've made it a note to not hire friends. I would also say investing in personal relationships. When I was a sophomore in undergrad is when I really started working on KnoNap. And I made a promise to myself that I would invest in people and relationships that invested in me. And I would cut relationships off that were one-sided. And I think I wish I would have done that sooner because it showed me which people in my life are there for the journey versus just the highlight reel. And I want the people in my life, and I want to be that person in other people's lives that you're there for everything, the highs and the lows. There are a lot of lows, and as you know, there are a lot of lows in growing a company, and so you have to appreciate the highs. But people that are there for the journey, I probably would have done that sooner.
All very true and great advice. And Danya, I've got to tell you again, it's just been such a joy and a pleasure to speak with you today about your journey. I have no doubt that your journey is just in the very early stages and that you're going to achieve amazing things through your life as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, and as a motivational speaker who hopefully will inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs and inventors. And so as we bring this to a close, I want to give you one last opportunity to maybe give that nugget of advice. what advice would you give to that next generation of innovators, that student who's listening to this presentation right now, who's maybe on the fence, maybe has that great idea, but isn't quite sure, should they move forward or should they just get a job?
I would just say do it. My feedback would be do it. And no one is able to tell you otherwise of your capabilities. And also feel free to check out our website, Instagram, social media. We'll be launching soon. So excited to stay in touch. And thank you so much, Louis, for having me here today to join this conversation.
Thank you, Danya. It's been a pleasure. We'll make sure that we post your website and all the information about your product. So if anyone's interested in supporting your Indiegogo campaign, they can do so. As I mentioned, this has just been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much. And congratulations on the launch of your product, and best wishes with all your future endeavors. Thank you.